Hey folks, you're listening to the Java Easily podcast, episode number 11.
Java Easily. News, tutorials, tips. Everything you need to know as a beginner Java developer.
In this episode, we're going to continue on from the processes we follow as a Java software engineer and drill down more into what that means we have to do from a day-to-day perspective. But listen, before we get started, if you're new to Java and need a helping hand, you can grab our free starter kit. Just go to javaeasily.com and you'll be able to grab it over there. We've also got all sorts of Java courses there too, which you might want to check out. But anyway, on with the episode. So in the last episode, we looked at the process we tend to follow in Java development, which was Scrum. We gave a good overview of how Scrum is used to develop and release Java software engineering projects. Now, how this transpires to what we do day to day as a developer is that there are so-called ceremonies that we do which dictate how our days and how our weeks are going to look like. So each day in general, the team will have a stand-up, a so-called stand-up. This is a meeting with the developers, the testers, possibly the product owner, but definitely with the Scrum Master, possibly the technical architect too, definitely with the tech lead. And the purpose of this meeting is for each member of the project, member of this development team, to share pretty much their progress and where they are with things. And the format for an update, which you give as a developer in a stand-up, is fairly standard. It consists of what you did yesterday, where you say literally what you did yesterday, how it went, what you achieved, maybe some issues you had, things you learned, whatever it might be. It doesn't have to be War and Peace. In actual fact, the shorter the update that you can give, the better, because that's why it's actually called a stand-up meeting. The idea is if everybody stands up, literally, which is what it used to be, then people want to have short meetings. Whereas if you get into an office and you sit down in chairs and you get comfortable, then meetings can just go on and on and on and never end. So that's why this concept of a so-called stand-up meeting came into being. But yeah, as a developer, you say what you did yesterday, then you say what you're going to do today, in other words, what your plan is for the day, and then you'll also highlight if you have any so-called blockers. Now, a blocker is something which you need to be solved pretty quickly, otherwise you can't do your job. So for example, if you can't get a connection to a database and your piece of work relies on connecting to that database and writing some queries or whatever, the purpose of flagging this in the stand-up is that it's an opportunity for the Scrum Master to be able to unblock you as a developer. Now that might be by instructing another member of the team to help you. It might be by them getting on a call with some DevOps person to allocate some credentials to you or allocate an account to you, whatever it might be. But in this way, with this format of what you did yesterday, what you're going to do today, and what your blockers are, with everybody doing that, it gives the whole team a nice way of being able to share knowledge about the project itself, to know about what the ins and outs are from a day-to-day perspective, but moreover, to keep the momentum going, to keep the project flowing and going in the right direction. So that nobody's ever stuck, nobody's ever blocked for longer than need be, and the work can keep going and the development team can keep contributing and collaborating towards this end goal, which is the sprint goal that you decided at the start of the sprint, which is basically what you intended to deliver during that sprint. So that's day to day. So typically Monday to Friday you'll have a stand-up meeting. It shouldn't really last longer than 15 minutes. In an ideal world, maybe 20. If you can have one for say 10 minutes, that's even better. So that's the idea of a stand-up. Now, as we said before, at the beginning of the sprint, or rather just before the sprint starts, the Scrum Master is the person who will actually start the sprint, and that's where the tickets or the work items, the pieces of work have been pulled from the backlog into the current sprint, usually using a tool like Jira, which is a software as a service where you can move tickets along from the backlog into a current sprint and then move them from to do to doing and then to done. Usually there are different statuses, more fine-grained than that, but we won't go into that for now. But it's just a way of managing your work. But yeah, just before the sprint starts, there's been some backlog refinement that's been done, which can also be called backlog grooming. I prefer the term backlog refinement though, where all the tasks in the backlog and the features in the backlog, all the more important or the more imminently deliverable items, are pulled to the top of the backlog. Then there's a planning session with the whole team where we all collectively look at the top of the backlog with the product owner, and then collectively as a team we decide, after we've estimated the tickets, which pieces of work we can commit to for this sprint. So we'll have this so-called planning session. That will typically take 1 to 2 hours. It's quite a long meeting, but you get a lot out of it, particularly with the planning poker aspect that we mentioned before, which facilitates a lot of good communication about the business requirements and how the software works, that kind of thing. And then at the end of the sprint, we have a demo. So that's where we'll demonstrate the software that we've done. Typically it's a developer that will demo. Sometimes it might be a tester, but usually it's a developer who does that. That might just be, say, 30 minutes. And also part of the ceremonies, which are these collections of meetings that we have in Scrum, is that you'll then have a so-called retro or a retrospective. And that's usually a slightly longer meeting. It might be, say, like an hour long, where again, the development team get together and look at what they've done. and it's an opportunity for the team to discuss what they did well, what they didn't do so well, and hopefully out of that grab bag of ideas, pull out some items that they might want to commit to doing to be able to improve the overall process. And again, those items then will either go in the backlog as a point of consideration for the next refinement session, or just to be addressed at some future date. Now, besides these meetings, the stand-ups, the planning sessions, demos and the retrospectives, besides these, in general, pretty much as a developer, you're kind of left to your own devices, so you can really get into a good headspace, have some deep focus time where you can work on the code and just get things done. You might have ad hoc meetings here and there with particular people as you see fit. So for example, I need to understand more about this testing framework, so I'm going to organize a meeting with this tester, or I need to know a little bit more about the business side, so I need to have a quick catch up with the product owner. But in general, these are the only meetings that you have. Now, if you're in a more advanced team and you're working on a bigger piece of work, in other words, not something that's just like a quick task you can do, or something that might just take like a day or a couple of days, if you're working on like a larger scoped task, like a really huge piece of functionality, or at least fairly significant piece of functionality, then you might not be able to get all you need in terms of understanding of that functionality and what's required just out of the planning sessions or what's written in the ticket. Typically, tickets might be updated during the planning session to add a little bit more information. But if you need to go deeper on a topic, then you might also have what's known as a 3 amigos meeting at the start of the piece of work. So in a 3 amigos meeting, the idea behind that is the developer gets together with a tester, the product owner, or somebody from the business side, or a business analyst. So then you'll have the developer resource, the testing resource, and the business resource, each coming from different angles. So from the coding side, from the testing side, and from the requirement side. And during this 3 amigos meeting, you'll collectively discuss this particular piece of work. And that's nice, having people from the different disciplines, because it means that as a developer, I'm going to get more information on the business value and the actual requirements, what the business want and why they want it, get more context about that. I'm going to understand more about the testing aspect and how it's going to be tested, which maybe I haven't considered as a developer, certainly not up front. The business side will get more of an idea of how complex it might be to code. It might also give them an opportunity to think about scenarios they didn't think about, which the tester has brought to the table, and all these kind of things. But at the end of that meeting, everybody should have a good, very clear understanding of what the piece of work is, everyone's on the same page, and then you as a developer can start your piece of work. Now, doing this up front means that down the line, you're less likely to have to rework this piece of work, and hopefully it does what it's supposed to do. And that's a good enough overview for Scrum, I think, for now, to give you an idea of what happens from a process perspective and how that dictates what you do from day to day. Key takeaway here is it's not difficult, it's well organized, and it's there to help you. And also, because it involves other people as well, and everyone's on the same page, it leads to a much happier and more collaborative way of developing software together, which makes you, in turn, a happier developer. Anyway, that wraps it up for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, take care and enjoy your week ahead.